into the wonderful, into the wonderful.
Hi, welcome to another Lemon Amiga play guide and review. This time we'll be taking a look at Gods, released in 1991, published by Renegade and Accolade, and produced by the BITMAP brothers. Long-time Amiga fans may be aware that Mike Montgomery and Eric Matthews are practically the BITMAP brothers, and this game was designed by Eric Matthews, who worked on Speedball 2 in 1990, and the Chaos Engine in 1993. To help him with the design was Steve Toll, who also created Buffalo Bill's Wild West show in 1989 on the Amiga. The code was Mike Montgomery, and he started on Xenon in 1988 and Amiga Karate with Eric Matthews in 1989 before moving on to Cadaver in 1990. The graphics were created by Mark Cole, who worked on Speedball in 1988 before moving on to Xenon 2 in 89 and Magic Pockets after this in 1991. The title music was created by Nation 12 on an Atari ST, and anybody who's tuned into our Speedball 2 review might realise Nation 12 was comprised of John Fox, who previously worked with Ultravox, and Nation 12 also included the main guy behind Bomb the Bass and the guy behind the release Three Lions with Frank Skinner and David Baddiel. The title music is tremendously well done, but there is no music in the actual game, unfortunately. And the sound effects in-game were created by Richard Joseph, who practically needs no introduction because he's been involved with the Amiga music scene practically since day one. So let's check out this game, let's dive on in and see what this is all about. Gods is a run and gun platform game, and from the main menu all we can do is either start the quest or enter a password. The passwords will appear on the high score table, and to begin we are virtually defenceless. We have to pick up this knife before we can actually attack those creatures. If you fail to pick up that knife, well, you can't attack them. And you can see a crystal there in the corner. That green crystal will be collected later on, and that is actually a teleport device, but there is no way to collect that at the moment. You can see at the bottom left hand side of the screen is our energy in the flask, and that orange flask is full. By activating that switch we can get rid of those barriers and they will not deplete our energy. We can also climb ladders, and by using the ladder as a halfway point we can shoot enemies from the safety of a ladder, and certain enemies will also give us weaponry upgrades. So now I have two knives to throw at these aliens, and by waiting until you hear those, they will actually make a noise when they appear, and by shooting those at precisely the right point, you can grab the diamond that they drop. Unfortunately, the controls are a little slow, so the player only has time to turn and then fire, and if they fire first, their controls may freeze and they may be a sitting duck. But you saw there, I shot the alien and now I cannot collect that crystal because I didn't shoot that on the exact correct point. And no, we cannot duck and fire at the same time. If we duck, then that will bring up the inventory screen, and that will also freeze our controls. So don't be caught out by trying to duck and fire, otherwise you'll be a sitting duck yet again. By activating this switch we can get rid of that moving barrier again, and this time pulling down and pressing fire we can pick up this key. If we pull down and don't press fire, then we will drop the item. but you may notice a number of switches on the wall, and these activate certain traps and treasures. If we click this one so the switch is up, then that will reveal a hidden entrance to the green crystal we saw earlier on. But for now we will ignore that, and we'll come back to that later on, because we'll need to teleport, and if we don't remove the spikes above where we are, then we might teleport and get killed. So by climbing this ladder and flicking these switches, yes, all switches on this level will make a difference, and by moving those switches in a certain position, that will get rid of traps, and that will also instigate monsters to appear, which, yes, we can duck underneath those, and the game will periodically give us extra health there. But by moving that switch, we now get rid of those moving spikes, which is terrific, and this will give us access to the rest of the level. And it's great that the game gives us energy, and the AI was highly praised in this game, because if the player is doing poorly, then the game will generally give the player a hand by rewarding extra health and extra lives. If the player is doing really well, then they might not get those aids, and that sure is an AI benefit to the game. Meanwhile, I've just found a hidden room, and unlocking the door using the brown key, we've now picked up a gold key, which we shall need later on. A good tip to remember is that all these switches should really be in the up position, and if the switches are in the up position, then that gives us most of the rewards. But in this section, actually all the switches must be in the down position, and that will actually give us an extra reward of a special hidden chest and a key. And in here we will find a number of extra bonus items. If we should return all these switches to the up position before we leave, then that will give us even more bonuses in the shape of another gold crystal, and that just reminds us we need to pick up the green crystal from where we left it. And yes, we can drop from this height, but that will lose some energy. But if we walk or fall off the edge of that platform, that will preserve our energy. And we cannot get back to the start of the level, but what we can do is drop down this gap that we opened up before, next to the crystal that we cannot get. And in here, well, if we destroy this alien, that will give us the extra gems that we need, and those extra gems will actually increase our money, and we can use money at the end of certain levels to increase our firepower. So it's crucial to gain those extra gems on this level 1, and that gives us extra money going into the first shop, which should appear after the second level. I don't think that you gain an extra shop on the end of the first level, and I still haven't worked out how to get that switch there. You can see in the upper left hand corner, the switch there should really require a moving platform, but unfortunately I cannot remember the sequence of switches to trigger that moving platform, and so, well, unfortunately I am not going to be successful here, and so all I can do is leave the level and move on to level 2. By pushing up we can ascend and descend ladders, but ladders aren't the easiest things to maneuver, as we shall see later on. If you reach this point quickly enough, you might find extra rewards dropping from the sky, but let's exit. Due to the unique way that this game has been designed, the next level will buffer after the previous one, giving us the illusion of one huge world. And so as we make our way onto World 1, Stage 2, you can see I actually activated that hidden switch there on the wall, and we can find a key there. And yes, by switching our direction left and right, we can just about destroy those enemies in time. And again, if we pick up that key, that might reveal a chest or a door later on. But if we jump right on the edge of that platform, that will actually take us to the top level, and it doesn't look possible, but it has to be possible, because, well, that's the way to go. And that green gem there will actually give us some more bonus. So let's run on the edge of that platform and see if we can make it. No, we fail. Third time lucky. And, well, you can't jump from the lower platform, unfortunately. This top way is the way to go. And having done so, by activating that switch, you will find lots of aliens there, or enemies dropping from the sky. And by activating the switch, more will appear. You can see I'm collecting those gems there, and you can see the skull there on the right. If I collect that, that will act as a smart bomb, and that will destroy all these aliens. And so, well, I'm doing it the hard way actually, by destroying those one at a time. But if we should move along and collect that smart bomb, that will destroy most of those enemies for us. But I don't think you can collect the extra mask there and the health unless the switches are in the right position, and well, I haven't worked out the right position to gain those, so let's drop down into a no way back. And here we can see if we pick up the narrow fire there, then that will concentrate our fire, and yes, you can hear those aliens approaching. They will growl just before they appear on screen, and that gives us the tip to turn around and start firing. When all the enemies have disappeared, then we can collect this flask, and that needs to be returned to a special room. Upon doing so, we will gain a life and the exit to the level. But the room is difficult to get to, and you can see my energy there is petering out on the bottom. So unless the game rewards us extra energy, or unless we can find that, we are about to die. And on this section it is difficult enough to get to the bottom of that ladder, and particularly with these guys firing their guided missiles, sometimes you can hide in that corner there and duck and avoid most of those shots, but you'll find that you need to get down there and kill those aliens, and if you are stuck in that corner then you cannot. So the best thing to do is to run out, climb that ladder and force those enemies to back off, and then descend the ladder and shoot them. So this is me waiting and plucking up courage to do that. Ascend the ladder, and hopefully they will walk away and their firepower will spread out. And now if I turn around and walk all the way back, that should mean that those aliens, if I run down the ladder pretty quickly, that should mean those aliens are easy enough to take out. And yes, you can drop down off that ledge and run down and drop down there fairly quickly so they don't get hit, but we have been hit unfortunately. And this green switch there, that's another one of those combination things that require a switch in the right position. There are 3 switches to maneuver, and if these 3 switches are in the right place, then one of those will destroy the spike, one of those will release the gem, and another one of those will give us an extra bonus. If we can't destroy that spike, then we'll have to jump over that the hard way, and sometimes it's easier to clean up the enemies because the enemies will not respawn once they are destroyed, which is terrific. And again, it only just gives the player enough time to destroy the hard one and then the easy ones. If you turn around to defeat the easy ones first, then the hard one will kill us. So let's see if we can negotiate this level and find out the right combination of switches in order to destroy that spike. And is it this one? Well, no, that didn't do anything. And so if we flick this switch, all that does is conjure 2 more enemies who waste no time in blowing me up. We are invulnerable for at least 10 seconds after we die, and that allows us to destroy these monsters. But unfortunately that spike still remains, and even though all these switches are up, I cannot find the right combination. So, well, fruitless jumping around doesn't help, and so, well, let's try all the switches up and see if that does anything. And it appears not. We can climb this ladder and climb this platform there, and that will reveal another key and another bonus. Unfortunately, that platform is protected by a large number of tough enemies, and so you have to lay into those straight away, otherwise you'll die. Let's try and get that key anyway, for what it's worth. And, well, our inventory is full there, so we can't actually collect that key. We only have 4 inventory spaces, and when 3 are full, then that means we can no longer carry an item, so the 4th one is redundant. So we can drop one of these special items, but those are needed later on, so it's a question of what to drop and what to keep. This brown key is usually for a brown door, and doors require keys in this game, and so, well, I'm going to leave that behind and see if I can progress just with what we've got. If we fall off the edge of that platform there to the right, then we can fall down into a pit of death, but if we use our newly acquired trapdoor key in conjunction with that switch, then that will close. But what we are actually doing is destroying these minotaur heads, which pose no problem whatsoever. And you might remember we collected a flask earlier on that needs to be moved into this door. Unfortunately, we don't have the key to open that door, and we do not have the key to open that chest either, but by pressing that switch that reveals the key, and we can use that key to open up this chest and get those goodies. So you can see the flask there. We need to return that flask into that room, but we have not got the door key, unfortunately, so we're going to have to backtrack and get it. An item description will appear at the bottom in green, and that will give us a clue, and if we have the trapdoor key, then we can operate that switch and that will close. Let's open this door, and that will also take us to a crystal which we can pick up for extra bonus. And well, sometimes those extra things aren't easy to find, but with those switches and the right order, it's certainly possible. So let's backtrack again and get that key. It's certainly great to hear this character making noises as he falls off and lands on different things, and he can be screaming wildly there if he gets hit. But we have finally made it into the treasure room, and the whole point of this room is to drop these treasure items, and it will give us extra goodies for doing that, and a key, and that key is the key to the exit of the level. We can pick up extra items in here, and I'm not sure whether these give us extra money at the end of the level or not, but I think, well, it's best to drop all these items and leave those in the treasure room, and hopefully that will give us an extra bonus as well for being kind and not robbing those items from the treasure room. You never know what the game might throw at you next, and puzzles containing morality may not be unheard of. Now that we finally have the exit door key, we can make our way to the exit door, and I like to press all those buttons there on the wall, and sometimes you might gain an extra life at this point if you make it to the exit quickly enough, but yet again I failed to do that. On to World 1 Part 3. Collecting this circular item will then bring up the shop, and the shopkeeper will then march on from the right hand side, and he will offer you his wares. In here we can use up all our money and all our gem total that we've managed to find on the first 2 levels, and the lower the item is on that section, the more it will cost. So the middle row are middle expensive and the bottom row are the most expensive, and so I will be selecting a number of these throwing spikes, and that should make my job easier. Next to that there is a portable shield which we can select, and that will help protect us on the level, and that's a freeze potion. But yeah, for this experiment I will actually collect the shield, and that will waste one of our allotted gaps in our inventory, so that is one to watch out for. We can also top up our power there, our energy level, by buying bread or buying energy top-ups and flasks, and you can see in the bottom corner a heart which will give us full energy, but we cannot collect any lives. Unfortunately, we have not got enough cash to buy lives, and the top row are more or less useless, so it's the middle row that we need to concentrate on. We will find extra weapons later on in the game, so let's spend all our cash and move on to World 1 Section 3. And in here we will find a number of odd items and a number of puzzles to work out. You can see the flask in the bottom corner is protected by some spikes yet again, so by removing these guys and collecting their gems, and then using those switches yet again in the right order, and up yet again is the right position for most of those switches. So if we go around and move all those switches up, then we will find those spikes begin to disappear. And now, well, we cannot still jump down there, so let's destroy another alien and let's move on. We can destroy aliens by moving up and down on ladders, and sometimes these things aren't easy by any means, and yet again pulling down by trying to pull down and press fire at the same time, that brought up our inventory, and that meant a life over. So sometimes those things can certainly happen, and I'm having no effects on this guy unless I risk life and limb dodging his fire. But as there are no time limits in this game, then the player can take their time and they can work out the puzzles in an orderly fashion. So now those switches are both up. You can see the platforms above there have now closed, and this has been destroyed. This bonus item is actually a high jump, and by picking up that thing we can now high jump onto those platforms which have now closed. Yes, if we activate those two switches, then that's the way to get through that part of the level. And that reveals a key, and we never know what kind of locks these keys may open. The best thing to do is just to collect those, and well, that's actually inadvertently activated my shield there, so I'm going to use that to destroying these enemies. You don't really need to do that, but because I have the shield, I'm going to waste that, and that saves our precious energy. We are down to 1 life, so we are awarded lives periodically at score checkpoints, and they will fall down from certain hidden places, and we can also acquire lives by working out puzzles. And you can see I've just acquired a weapon upgrade there, which gives me an arc weapon, which makes defeating these enemies much easier. So the more you can pick up, the better. At this point, jumping into that open gap isn't really an appealing option, so I'm going to run as far as I can over to this side and take out yet another hard enemy. You can see dropping down there, he's right in the face of that enemy, and well, do we really need to do that? I don't think so. And so we can exit along the top and exit that top ladder, but if we choose to drop down here, you might think that's a pit of death, but it isn't. We don't have the key to open that door, unfortunately, and that switch does absolutely nothing. But we can climb out of that pit, and we can negotiate the level that way. That door can only be opened from the inside, and so let's go the long way around and fall down that trapdoor. If we fall down that absolutely perfectly, then we won't get hit. And so if we fall down here and fall down again, hopefully we should be able to land and avoid that guy. Well, got him, he got us, and so I have no idea how to get rid of that guy without the best weapons. And you can get a war hammer which can lob down gaps, and the war hammer will get rid of those guys, but we have not found that yet, and it gives us an extra energy top up for all our extra time and trouble. So sometimes finding those extra hidden sections rewards us with extra lives and extra energy, but sometimes those can be avoided, and it really isn't necessary to traverse the entire level in order to complete the game. Just like Risky Woods that we reviewed a few weeks ago, this game definitely benefits from firing ahead and destroying those aliens before they enter the screen, because those monsters definitely pack a punch. And let's just pick up another fireball there, which helps destroy those. And just like Risky Woods, that fireball will give us a nice arc, and that means we can fire down and across and even up towards enemies there without getting hit. So the more weaponry we can pick up, the less likely we are to take damage. But you see that roof there on the left? You might think that it is possible to walk on that roof, and well, I don't really want to risk that, but it is not possible. And I will show you that jumping down steps as well depletes our energy, but it is not possible to go that way, and it is not possible to go to the right either with those spikes. So watching out there for the right way to go. Certainly falling off ladders and falling off high platforms is the biggest risk in this game. The enemies really don't deplete the damage too much, but if we fall off the ladder there trying to fit into that small gap, that is not possible yet again, and so that has depleted our energy. So trial and error isn't really worth it in this game, and sometimes you just die by trying things and failing miserably, so sometimes it is best to learn these levels the hard way before attempting a long run. And so these levels require, just like Risky Woods, patience, as well as a memorized formula, an exact route to complete these levels. And if you follow the formula and learn all the tricks, then you will progress. If you don't, well, you can't. So in here, we've managed to find yet another key. If we can avoid that firepower and get it, and that key will be certainly helpful later on. And you might think that we can just drop down there and save a life, but because we waste energy with any drops, that is not recommended. And well, that's one way to kill the enemy. But because the controls are actually quite sluggish in this game, it's difficult enough to turn around and fire and just destroy enemies quickly enough. So the controls in this game certainly leave a little to be desired. They require mastery and they aren't easy. On this section, you'll find the statues on the wall there actually materialise into real creatures, and sometimes they do that very quickly indeed. But on this section, for some reason, they are materialising into creatures very slowly, and that means we can take our time removing these. I've certainly known a version on the A500 where these materialised very quickly indeed, and these creatures came after me like a swarm of bees. But for some reason, on this WHD load, they are taking their time, and yes, I can pick up that shield there, and that will help shield us, but we have actually dropped onto a door that we cannot leave unless we flick that switch, and then that opens the door. By pushing up on the controller, we can walk through doors, and that gives us access to the gold key. By simply standing there, we can absorb those hits and take those enemy damage, and that won't affect us whatsoever. But luckily we are down to 0 lives, so luckily that won't do that. And again, let's dispose of these enemies while they are there. That will give us extra cash for the shop at the end of the level. And so it is worth taking our time, yet again, milking all these enemies, and they will not respawn even if we die, and that's great. There's nothing worse than games where the enemies respawn once you die, and you have to do the whole level all over again. Taking our time there to get on and off that ladder, we've actually found a dead end, so we're going to have to backtrack there. There is no way back. If we fall down that pit, then we're going to lose energy. So let's jump over that gap, collect that gold key. So we have 2 keys there, and we can use one of those keys to open up the door on the right. And so let's head on over there, open the door and flick that switch, and that should take us to another section. In here we will find yet another key which we'll need to open another door. And look at all those crystals there. I have still no idea how to gain all those crystals, and there is certainly enough there to boost our impact in the shop. But that's one of those key features that I've yet to work out, and probably the switches are in the wrong order for that to happen. And so there are too many switches in this game with too many combinations, and if you don't get those absolutely right, then bonuses like that aren't easy to attain. Dare I risk jumping off there? Well, no, I don't risk jumping off there because we are down to half a life. And, well, I have to risk jumping down there to kill those enemies, and that's certainly how you do it. If you climb that ladder, you will get killed. So sometimes you have to drop off those ladders, and that gives us the best chance. Keeping track of all these keys isn't easy either, and usually the brown ones are for the doors, and the small grey ones are for the chests. And the gold key is for the exit to the level, so let's not fall down that gap. Let's just flick that switch, and we actually find in here the first level boss. The first world boss isn't easy unless you actually know the formula once again, and all you have to do is stand in the right position. If you can, that's fine. If you can't, you're going to die. But luckily we have an extra life there, and you can see the boss's energy on the right. That's the grey flask, and that's not actually moving anywhere. We have to lure the boss on screen virtually before we can get any hits on target, and then when that boss is on screen, it's a matter of hiding underneath that firepower, and then you don't get hit. If you can't, you're going to die. So let's try that again. Lure the boss onto the screen, duck under that firepower, and as long as we have 2 of those fireballs and 3 of those throwing stars, then the boss's energy will slowly begin to deplete. And it does take time to walk backwards and forwards. As you can see, I'm taking absolutely no damage whatsoever, and this boss is definitely the easiest boss in the game. So as you can see, let's speed this up, and then we can get to the point of death. It shouldn't be too far away. There you go. And then we can collect those items, and now we can spend that in the shop. Just for our time and trouble, we also gain a chest and one of those keys there. Unfortunately, there's no way back to open the door, which that key must have fitted. But let's climb the ladder anyway and enter the shop. And so this time when we enter the shop, we should find that we have a little more cash to spend. So waiting for the shopkeeper there, appearing from the left this time. And what have we got? Well, we can afford the axes on the bottom row. The battle axes there, it definitely can be afforded. And we can actually buy ourselves an extra life as well. A tip for the shop is to buy the most expensive items first, and then you can basically ration the rest of your cash on the upgrades. At this point I could afford the extra life, but because we are given a number of extra lives for free in the next world, I'm actually going to buy this magic axe instead, and we can use that to lob down holes and to destroy creatures waiting at the base of ladders, which certainly will come in handy. And with the rest of our cash, well, we can't afford much, I'm afraid, so all we can do is investigate the top row and perhaps buy ourselves a little food, and that will increase our energy. And if we have one whole life going on to the next section, well, that makes the job much easier than if we only have half a life. I'm actually also going to buy myself a shield because we can afford that, and that will yet again waste a space in our inventory, but because we can afford that, let's buy that. And a little bit of food later, let's move on to the next level, if not indeed the next world, which we can access just by tripping that switch. You can see in the second world the graphics have been transformed into yet another completely new level, where we'll find a completely new enemies to defeat and a completely new set of puzzles to figure out. So in this one, you saw I clicked the switch there to the far right before I did anything, and I will collect this extra life there, which is valuable, and that means we have a chance of completing this level. These levels, by the time we get to this point, are as much of action as they are about solving puzzles. Using our fireballs to remove those aliens, you might notice a question mark there, and that gives us a tip. There aren't many tips available in this game, but this is a very difficult puzzle, and that is actually a thief there who will run and steal that shield, and we need that shield to get through those spikes. The easiest way is to use the shield that we've just bought in the shop, and then that will allow us to get through those spikes absolutely no problem. But I'm actually going to show you the legitimate way to get through that puzzle, and that requires a gem. At this stage I also found a first snake, and the snakes actually, when they explode, will deliver a lot of baby snakes onto that platform, and you have to kill all those babies before you can proceed. So sometimes that takes a little time, and obviously they pose no threat while I'm in this pit. So remove those, and you might see a switch there. Let's flick that. That will reveal even more enemies and even more credit. Gods has a fantastic atmosphere thanks to that range of sound effects, and that tentative, tremendous atmosphere is really palpable in certain situations. So the Richard Joseph voice effects there, and all the different effects for falling and shooting and dying are tremendously well done, and certainly gives this game some depth. You see there the thieves have dropped a casket there, and we certainly need a key to open that, which we haven't got at the moment. And well, we have the shield, and we'll use that to get through this section, which is actually pretty easy, but I'm actually going to use the shield anyway just to free that gap. Then you can see there a grey gem. That's the first gem we will need for a puzzle later on. Certainly best to collect every item you find in this game, and so I'll also find the key there for that chest. And if we drop down, well, climb down this ladder, better not drop down that ladder for obvious reasons. If we climb down, then that chest will open and the goodies are ours. So the progress in this game is rewarded, and the player feels really rewarded when they solve a puzzle and they get all those items. So longevity is maintained in this game. Unfortunately, the puzzles are just a bit too tricky and a little daunting for the casual player who doesn't have a clue what they are actually doing. This particular trap will kill us if we don't get this absolutely perfect. What we must do is drop our grey gem around this spot, and that will attract the thief. The thief will then drop, or otherwise get destroyed, and drop his shield, and we can collect that and use that to get through the spikes. But remember to pick up that gem before we leave, because another thief may pick up that, and well, we need that for yet another puzzle later on. And in this stage we have to wait until that shield runs out before we flick that switch, otherwise that shield will destroy the thief which appears, and that will yet again write off the chances of completing this level and getting anywhere in the game, because that thief is necessary to get that key, and if you destroy him early, well, you've written off your entire chances. So when he approaches, you can now pick him off, collect that key, and move through the door. That certainly wasn't an easy puzzle to figure out, and don't forget to leave the switch in the up position before we leave that area, and that should maintain the exit. If all the switches are up, then the exit door will open. If you leave one of those down by mistake, then the exit door will not open, and you'll have to backtrack throughout the entire level trying to find the door that you missed. So let's use up our shield on 0 enemies there, unfortunately, but you can see those things on the wall there that are easily disposed. But you can see in this section we find many ladders, and if we fall off those ladders, then we will get our energy wiped out, and if we fail to destroy any of these materializing enemies as well. The Warhammer isn't really effective on the snakes, so all you can do is move to the edge of that platform and defeat those the long way, and they will jump and attack you. And sometimes moving inch by inch on these levels, destroying the monsters one at a time, is the best way. Certainly trying to speed run through these levels is suicide. I think it's a pity that there is no in-game music, and the title music is certainly tremendous, and I absolutely love the title music, and the lack of in-game music doesn't spoil this game with the range of tremendous sound effects on offer. But it would have been nice because the PC doesn't have music either, but the console versions, the SNES, the Mega Drive, they certainly do have music, and the SNES version and the Mega Drive works a little quicker than this. This runs at 17 frames per second, so the scrolling is a little jerky, and the SNES and the Mega Drive run at full frame rate, so that certainly helps. Making sure the switch is in the up position yet again before we move into this room, and this is a special room indeed because this is a puzzle room. You can see on the wall there are 3 lights, and those lights will be lit with a gem. We've used up our grey gem to light one of those lights, and that will lower that platform, enabling us to pick up the gold key. But we still need to find 2 more gems, the yellow gem and the green gem, in order to finish that puzzle and collect that key. But there are actually 2 ways to collect that gem, you can see floating at the top there, and I'll be showing you both ways in this play guide. The first way is the hardest way, and that's to collect all the gems. So you can see a green gem over there. Let's make our way over towards that. That isn't the gem that we need, that is just bonus, but inside this creature you'll find the green gem, and so let's pick that up. Let's now return back to the puzzle room, and hopefully now that we have that gem, that should open up another section, and well, at least light under the light on that section, and that should lower that platform just a little bit and use up that gem. Unfortunately, that is still not low enough to collect that key, so we need to find a 3rd gem, and that is below where these ladders are at the moment. So let's climb all the way down to the bottom of the level, and we should find that extra gem by destroying 2 more thieves. Sometimes we have to wait for those items to stop bouncing before we can collect those, otherwise we cannot, and it's easy to drop items by mistake there if we land that selection reticule of the wrong item in our inventory, and that's maybe another one of those annoyances in the game. This door marks the exit on the end of the level, but we still have not got the world key, the gold key. So let's return yet again to the puzzle room and deliver our final gem, and that should at least give us access to the gold key. The next step is to obtain the green gem there, and by flicking that switch in the upward position we can at least make sure that the exit door will now open, and flicking that twice should actually lower that crystal once the exit door is open. So let's maneuver back down to the bottom of the level and let's see if that will work. Collecting those extra items there sometimes will reveal an enemy which is difficult to hit, and those flying things are notoriously difficult to hit, so in this case I'm actually going to climb down the bottom of the level, and that enemy should follow us, and that should make it easier to destroy. So sometimes you can move down and force that enemy to follow us, and that gives us an extra chance, but sometimes we can just run away, just like that. Flick the switch, and that should open the exit door. Moving to the right here, we'll find the final section of this World 2 Stage 1, and after a few snakes and a few enemies, which we can ordinarily duck our way under, and that flying thing which we can finally get rid of, that will lead on to another door and another chest. We do not have the key to open the chest, but we certainly have the key to open the door. That now opens the door, and we can collect all these items. Here we must be careful not to drop onto the floor, because that will wipe our energy virtually down to 0. What we must do is actually jump off the edge of that platform and then fall, and then that will hopefully preserve most of our energy. And thank God that this level does not have any time, because dealing with these incessant monsters isn't a chore I look forward to. And you'll find another chest there, but we do not have the key for that chest. But we do find a key for the chest that we passed before we entered this room. So if we take that and exit this room, then we should be able to open that chest with that key. And the colour of the chest is the same as the colour of the key, and that's the only tip that the game provides. So the brown chest will not open, but the orange chest will open with the orange key, and that yet again frees up space in our inventory. So before we leave this level, even though the level exit door is wide open, I'm actually going to secure myself a little extra funds by taking another route. And this extra route is another way to collect that green gem that we abandoned earlier on. So let's climb the level again, and I'll show you the alternative route. If every switch is now in the right position, then operating this switch will then lower that crystal, which is actually a teleport device, which teleports us onto a room full of snakes, which can take time to get rid of. Generally, Gods is not a boring game. In fact, you'll be attacked from every angle at every stage, but sometimes it can get repetitive and destroying things the long, hard way. And do not collect that crystal, because that will teleport us out of the level. What we actually really need to do is to jump pixel perfect on the edge, and you can't expect the player to know that that is possible, but yes, it is possible to do that, and you can't expect the player to know all these traps there, but we do get a gem for all our trouble. But yes, trial and error, it does doesn't usually make the play easy in this game, and again makes the game quite daunting to the novice. And so all these tricks will have to be observed, including ignoring that teleport yet again. So do not jump in that direction, or do not collide with that teleport. Instead, you should jump over these spikes, and that will hopefully reward us an extra life. So that's the first one over. Let's see if we can make that again. And you notice another power jump icon there. As we collect that and go through the teleport, that will teleport us back to the puzzle room, and the power jump makes sure that we can jump onto that higher platform even if we don't collect 3 gems to trigger that the legitimate way. So with the high jump you can collect that key, and you can also use the crystals. Even though we now have 3 lives, the difficulty curve is very spiky indeed, and either the player knows what to do or they will be completely lost in this level, and I've certainly known myself to be completely lost without knowing what to do, and simply because the switches weren't in the correct position. You can see there it says World 1 completed, making it look like that level was actually part of World 1, and Level 2 password is there now, and so you only get the World 2 password halfway through World 2. From here on in, the levels really do take time to complete, and the easy 5-10 minute introduction rounds lead to these half an hour or 1 hour levels where patience must be used and time must be taken on these ladders to preserve our health. At this stage it's so easy to miss traps and easy to miss noticing switches on the wall, and you have to flick all those switches in order to operate those levers. But you can see if I jump over these spikes there and climb that ladder, there is actually a switch directly above that second ladder, and as we jump over this gap it's essential to remember to flick that switch before we head on to the main mission. And the main mission is actually to collect 3 chalices, a gold, a silver and a bronze chalice, which have to be taken to a special room, and that's the first one collected already. Unfortunately, we do not know the correct room to take those to, and we do not know this level either. In fact, I've only ever seen this level a few times. So, flicking these switches there, one of those leads to instant death, and the other one leads to further progress on the level. So, you have to be careful there. But luckily, we fell down the correct one, and that's 2 chalices collected, and that means we just have 1 chalice left to find. The clues aren't obvious in this game, but at least the programmers do give clues, and the game is often also helpful with its lives and energy too, and the AI was praised. As I said, the game actually interprets the player's maneuvers, and if they play badly then they are awarded extra energy and extra lives, and sometimes if the player gets to a certain checkpoint then they will gain extra lives, and having 7, 8, 9 lives by this point isn't actually unusual if you know the game. I've died a number of times, but I've still collected 3 lives. And do not fall down that ladder there, otherwise that's an easy life over, which is certainly easy to do in this game. And look at that, now we have 4 lives. So even though these high-res graphics are very detailed, the atmosphere, thanks to the sound effects and that great music, is tremendous. The puzzles are really interesting, but they are certainly too difficult for the average player, and the controls are sluggish. So there are just as many good points as bad points in this game, and certainly when I approached this in the 1990s I couldn't even get beyond the first boss. So I really do appreciate this game, its depth and complexity. I really do appreciate the firepower and the sound effects and everything else. But those puzzles there are just a little too difficult, and sometimes it's easy to get stuck in dead ends when the player cannot collect a key, or they fall down the wrong pits of death at the wrong time. And memorising infinite switches in different positions isn't easy either, and juggling keys and chalices with only 3 available slots there in our inventory, even though there are 4, it only gives us 3, or we'll drop an item. The niggly things like that really spoil this game. The presentation is certainly 9 out of 10, but the long-term playability and the longevity suffers because of those little details, and that's a shame. And look at this, I have to actually drop a key into that gap in order to leave myself a space available to collect this key. But you can see these pits of death there. If I inadvertently fall down these ladders, then that's a long drop. And again, all these different switches have to be memorized. And so the infuriating annoyances of this game, even though they are nowhere near as bad as Risky Woods and many other games that we've reviewed already, it just saves this game from being an absolute masterpiece, which it really deserves to be, because the BITMAP brothers and this game certainly has a huge legacy on the Amiga. Taking a look at the comparison zone, you can see the Sega Mega Drive and the SNES version is a very good version indeed. There is also a version for the Game Boy Advance, which is now sadly no longer available, and there was also a PC-DOS version and a version for the Acorn Archimedes computer. As I say, it was originally developed on the Atari ST and it was then converted to the Amiga and all the others. So this game really stands up graphically and sonically and in every other respect except for playability, and that's because the controls are laggy and all the rest of it. So I'm now trying to juggle items there by standing in thin air. I should be able to throw items down into that pit, and if I don't get that right to the pixel, then I will fall into that pit, and one of these keys will then be abandoned up here with no way back to collect it. But you can see, pulling those stunts, I've now collected that key, but unfortunately I wasted a life doing it, so that means we're down to 3. And more switches later. Yes, you can see the gold key on the floor there. That is actually the key that we need to exit this level. And more switches to contend with, and an unlimited number of snakes later. We actually tried to make progress, and the key to the middle door you see there is actually the gold key that we had to put down earlier on. There it is. If we collect that, then the door will open. Ouch. Yet another annoying feature there when you can't even kill snakes on the floor because you cannot bend down and shoot in a crouched position. But eventually we find the last of our chalices. The third chalice is here, just like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade there. So let's pick that up. And through this door you'll find another 2 keys which are essential to complete this game. If we climb down that ladder, that will return us to the bottom of the level, but if I should move back through that door, I will find the keys which I've left behind, and unfortunately I cannot carry the keys and the chalices at the same time. It will be helpful to be able to grab onto ladders in mid-air as well, but sometimes you just can't. So the difficulties are really starting to pile up there in this game. Being able to grab hold of ladders like that from jumping one to another should be easy, and if we are pixels closer to a ladder, it should be easy to grab onto that rather than basically miss the ladder completely and fall to our death. So I don't really appreciate that aspect of this game. We can collect the shield there, and that will preserve our energy, and we can fall off the edge of that platform and survive. Unfortunately we've had to abandon those keys, but at least if we remember where those keys are, the game will memorize the positions of our dropped items, and items will not disappear, and so once we kill enemies they stay dead, and so the game plays fairly in that respect. But again, we are wasting our last piece of energy now trying to destroy those enemies, and it won't be long before we die yet again, basically due to yet another miscalculated jump. This is the final door in this level, and this requires the gold world key. So I will drop all those chalices on the floor and go back and get those keys. And look at that, it's even giving us an extra bonus chest there just for our time and trouble. But yes, we can abandon those chalices and go back and collect those keys. And again, having three slots there and one vacant for picking up and dropping items straight away, having 3 out of the 4 isn't really appreciated in this game. The endless padding around from one location to another actually reminds me of a Dizzy game, and the game also reminds me of Leander and a number of other Amiga games in this ilk, and certainly the screen graphics represent the usual BITMAP brothers, grey and brown, which they became famous for. But you can see there, one of the keys actually opened the exit door, and that's actually allowed me to pick up all the chalices again. And from here, if we walk into this room, those items will disappear from our inventory, and it gives us a good time to turn around and grab a few last minute bonuses before we carry on to the exit. And the enemies certainly will not stop appearing to kill us. But now that we have all these chalices in that room, all that remains is to open the final door, and that will take us on to the next level. And now it says World 2 completed, which is again very confusing, because when we walk through the exit door we'll find the next world is identical to this, or at least the next level is identical to this, and so I have no idea where one world ends and the other begins. But yet again, collecting that gem gives us the shopkeeper. And do we have anything to spare? Yes, we do. We can actually afford an extra life, which is actually top priority, since we've just wasted a number of lives through leaps of faith. And we can also afford the spears, which is the second best weapon in the game. And the actual battle axes there, we can afford those or the spear, and one will replace the other. So I'm buying an extra throwing star there, and we can save the rest of that cash. But the spear should mean that the enemy directly in front of us can be shot, and that is certainly a powerful weapon as we move ever closer to the World 2 boss. On this level, it is necessary to collect 4 items, and they will be used to unlock a puzzle. You can see on the wall there, the 4 pieces of the puzzle will need to be inserted into that wall, and that will allow us to get to the end of level boss. And we have 1 piece already, and walking into that will insert that piece, and so we have 3 more to find. Because this game is so long, it really does take time to complete, maybe 2 hours on the outside, and so passwords really do come in helpful, but unfortunately the player really does have to progress far in order to get those passwords, and I still haven't got my second password, so if I die now, it's a long way back. So the passwords could have been used better, and items like this, where it isn't obvious what to do, the puzzles can certainly have done better, and it really does take a genius sometimes to work out what to do. So let's flick all those switches in that position, and the final switch finally reveals a platform which allows us to jump onto that high ledge and collect the key that we need to move through that door. And despite flicking all those switches, it's still a key that we need to open that door, and if we don't have the key, flicking the switch at the same time will not make the trap work. And look at this, if you get the key and the traps and the switches in the correct order, then you can progress, and it's as easy as that. In this room we find 4 rooms, and just like Bruce Lee, we will have to move into those rooms one into another, clear it out, and then move into the next one. And we'll find the usual array of enemies in there. The enemies don't really change, and the levels are actually becoming quite samey, but again, they are action-packed, and you can't say that the levels are boring. And it's hard enough killing these things, you have to run back from distance. Luckily we have the war hammers, and that's the only thing that we can get those ground-based targets with. But in the first room there, remember to flick the switch twice so that it appears in the upwards direction. Always leave all switches up. And then in this room we have to return a globe. There is actually a globe stand on the floor to the right of that bookcase, and if we return the globe there, then that will give us an extra piece that we need for the tapestry on the wall. But we do not have the globe at the moment, so let's move on to the next screen. flick the switch, open the door, and get in there. And so even on these levels, you can see the helmet there and the extra weapon. Unfortunately, they are there for a graphical show and eye candy, and we can actually not pick up the mace on the wall or the helmet, but we can pick up the ghost head there, and that will help us solve another part of the puzzle, which will eventually give us the map piece. But yes, even at this stage, infuriating things on the wall there, which you might spend hours trying to pick up, is not actually possible unless you have the jump potion, and I can't find the jump potion on this level, if indeed there is one. Sometimes jumping over snakes is the best policy, and if you can't do that, well, you have to lose energy. But let's not go back, let's collect the globe and avoid that spot on the floor there. Collect that globe, which is actually supposed to be a globe. It looks a lot more like a billiard ball, but let's collect that, dispose of that enemy. And these sub-rooms are really easy compared to the main rooms, which take forever. And look at that, the game actually gives us some more health. Well, at least thank God for small mercies. So we now have the globe, so there's nothing more up there, and the switch does absolutely nothing, or at least nothing as far as I can see at the moment. The endless switches and the repetitive nature of the working out the puzzles in the correct order and flicking those switches in the right order actually does get boring after a while. And well, if you have 3 switches there, then there is only a limited number of combinations, and playing this game shouldn't be a matter of picking open a lock using different switches combinations, because sometimes that is, well, sometimes it works just like that and you can open another section there, but sometimes it doesn't and you are flicking switches endlessly from one place to another. And let's just return to this room to see if we can collect those. No, we can't. So let's return to the first room and let's progress through that door that we left before. I don't know quite why we abandoned that, but we did. And the altar, an item has to be placed on the altar there to gain another item, and by using the war hammers we can lob those down into that gap, and that saves us getting killed. By climbing down this ladder, that will reveal the second tapestry piece, and that appears above us there, so we can just go up there and collect that. And so that's another piece of the wall collected, as well as the globe, and the globe will give us the third piece, so that just leaves one more to find. Returning to the top of this ladder, to the right of the altar, you can see another item, and I have no idea what that is. I think it's a pot of glue, but that item will need to be used to gain the fourth and the last piece of the puzzle. So there is no point dropping any items. None of these will work on the altar, unfortunately. So let's pick up the globe and carry on. So trial and error in this game, when things aren't necessarily obvious, really starts to take their toll. And well, if you move into these things, that's the second piece of the map there, because we've just used that pot of honey, whatever it was, on that table, and that gives us our next object for the wall. And there is absolutely nothing up here, so there is no point doing that. So let's return again to the first room. You can see the weapons fire there actually fires straight through the wall, and that's handy for killing monsters off the screen and through dead walls, and that's certainly helpful. So let's climb back, put the globe in the holder there, and that gives us another tapestry piece. And because we have one already, that's the final piece out of the 4. We have inserted the one in there already, so let's wander back to the wall and insert the rest. This gives us a green gem, which teleports us on to another part of the same level. Yes, these levels are huge, and it does take time, maybe half an hour to complete each one. And because there are no time limits, the player can spend however long they like on each one, but maybe half an hour per level is the average time once you get this late in the game. And you might be wondering why I haven't covered gods before. and that is because I can only get to the second level boss. The World 2 boss is as far as I've ever been able to get in this game, and no further. And I hoped by this stage that this game would have come up in the Lemon Amiga compos so that I could actually play this, but it hasn't. And so in this play guide you will see me getting as far as the level 2 boss, but no further. But hopefully my play guide has helped to uncover the puzzles in this game, so you can get to this place with just as many lives, but hopefully with more of a clue of what to do. At this stage we are unable to open this door because even though the switch is there, we do not have the correct door key, and so all the switches must yet again be in order, or at least the order specified by the programmer, and all these trapdoors you can see will need to be closed. At least now we have the spears, we can destroy snakes, and the lower spear should destroy the lower snakes on the floor, which means we shouldn't die so readily from those enemies. And again, the same snakes appear. Maybe in the next world we'll get another variety of enemies, but because I've actually never seen the next world, I have no idea. So that's the first switch that we need to progress, and that should be in the down position. And so if we walk all the way back, that will now enable us to flick the second switch, which should be also in the down position. And well, if we leave that switch in the down position, move to the third switch, that should also be in the down position. And finally, if we continue to the far right, we'll find yet another switch, and that should also, in this case, be in the down position. That will then reveal a platform that we can jump on to get to that ladder, which is yet another one of those puzzles. So let's jump up there and climb that ladder. And even climbing that ladder isn't particularly easy because the controls are stiff and laggy, and let's face it, a little dodgy on a game like this. And so, well, jumping into that gap should be nice and easy, but it isn't. And sometimes if you climb onto that ladder and don't push up straight away, then you will fall straight down. And so I'm yet again going to speed this up until we make it. To my mind, if this game didn't have these infuriances every now and again, and endless switches which do endless things, then this game would be top notch. The polish is definitely there, and the scores for this game were really terrific, considering this game was released in 1991, and the Amiga's heyday. It's certainly not been bettered as far as I'm concerned in the graphics front, and for these environmental sound effects, it certainly is awesome. So, taking a look at the scores, Amiga User International gave it 79% in July 1991. The Lemon Amiga crew on the Lemon Amiga website actually gave this 80%. Amiga Force gave this 83%. Amiga Power gave it 87%. And Amiga Computing and Amiga Formats gave this 90%. CU Amiga gave it 93%. Amiga Action and The One gave it 93%. And Ace gave it 90%, saying that the stunning levels and the stunning sound were amazing, and yet the laggy controls and the niggly puzzles actually let this game down. And I couldn't agree more. The laggy controls and the puzzles certainly let this game down, and if it wasn't for that, this would be highly playable. But still, with an average score of 85%, maybe I'd give this an 80%. It's a little too difficult, and if this game was any shorter it might be easier, and so I've never completed the game because it's just too damn long. After this stage, the player has been playing this for over an hour, and you can see there we're approaching up to an hour and 10 minutes now, and we still haven't got off World 2. And so the player's reflexes will be slower at this stage, and their will to survive may be decreased from what it was on level 1. Look at that. One thing dropping from the ceiling is enough to wipe our lives. Finally, after all that, we are fast approaching the end of the level, but yet again I still have not worked out how to open the bonus door, so I have not got the item I need. In this case, the item I need is a candle, and by picking up the candlestick we can use that to gain a gem. We will need to gain a gem in order to distract the dragon on the end of this level. If we do not collect the candlestick, we cannot collect the gem, and we will find the dragon is virtually impossible. So you can see the candlestick there in the top right. All we need to do is jump over there and collect that, destroy these enemies in the way, and that switch. And that should hopefully finally give us the item that we need to exit the level. If only it was that easy, then, well, the game would be certainly easy, but it isn't. Again, we have to walk on a moving platform, which is always nice to see in a platform game, I find. And let's collect that candlestick. And now, hopefully, if we return to the left, we will find a key to a trapdoor, which gives us actually the key to the bonus room, which we've been trying to open all along. But yet again, that key is protected by enemies, and virtually everything is protected by enemies in this game. So let's grab that key, and we still have the candlestick, so let's try and descend. And look at that, the gap in the floor is opened, and yet another key is there. So now we have two keys. Surely one of those keys will open the door to the bonus room. And so look at that, we can't even move through platforms without having to jump over those. Jump over that gap there on the floor before we fall down to our death again. And do one of these, yes, one of those keys do open the door, which gives us an extra life, which gives us 3. But even with 3 lives, the enemies are still hard, and they get harder as the game goes on, so you will not anticipate an easy ride to the end of the level. And jumping over ladders there is now a matter of course. If you fail to remember that trick, then it's a quick trip downwards, and we don't really appreciate that. So finally, all those traps are open, all those switches are in the right position through trial and error, and jumping over those things failed yet again because of the laggy slow controls, jumping maybe a second after I pressed that switch. And look at this, 3 barriers in our way. There is certainly a way to get rid of those 3 barriers by using those switches, but I'll be damned if I know which one to use, so let's just run in with the shield on full whack and inadvertently drop the candlestick there, which is a big mistake. We do not want to drop the candlestick, we do not want to drop the cross, and there you go. The only thing we can do to exit this is to jump, and luckily it doesn't deplete our energy all the way, even though it could do. But even though we can use the switches to get rid of those, I have no idea how to do that, so let's balance in midair yet again, pixel perfect jump, and we are still getting towards the end of the level. We've wrapped the review, we've done the scores. This is an incredible game, but it could have been so much better. The polish and the incredible presentation is there in spades, but there are too many things which let the game down, and unfortunately that spoils the score. But this game is certainly well remembered, and still to this day in the Amiga Hall of Fame, and Gods regularly gets a place in the top 10. So Gods there, massive heritage on the Amiga, and certainly fondly remembered, if not only for the great title music. The difficulty curve starts off nice and gentle, but by the time you get to this level it is very sharp indeed, and we've already wasted 1 life earlier on already by wasting it jumping down ladders and things like that. But we are about to lose yet another life, and that destroys our chances of getting through the second level boss, because with only 2 lives on the go, well, 1 life after this. With only 1 life on the go, that makes transversing the boss pretty difficult, if not impossible. Again, there is a quick way to do it, and there is an easy way to do it. If you know the right way, then it's not too bad, but if you've got no idea of the right way, then you will find you'll be defeated even at this late stage in the game. So let's finally jump over this gap, and you can see one of those creatures has food there. If only he dropped that food a second earlier, I might have saved myself a life. So even though I actually quite like Gods, it's not one of my favourite games. It's not a game that I return to again and again, because basically I usually die on this level and I haven't got any further. So Gods is certainly not one of my favourite games, but I've learnt a few tricks and I don't mind sharing those with you guys. hoping that you'll get further than I did. So it's one of those games where tricks really do count, and if you don't know those tips, well, sometimes you are nowhere. Destroying the final few snakes, we yet again haven't reached the end of the level, and these levels really are massive. Below us we'll find two doors which require keys. The first is a bonus room, the second is the door we need to find. If we actually open this door and throw the candlestick in there, that will give us a green gem. And we need to use this green gem to distract the dragon by placing that on the floor somewhere near it. But before we can do that, first we need the key to open the door, which can be found further along the corridor over to the right. So sometimes doors open with those switches, and sometimes you'll have to go ahead in the level, find those keys, and then backtrack all the way. And yes, the game expects you to memorize all these before you face the huge dragon, which if you have the spears, and I have 3 spear power there, then that is possible. And if you drop the gem in front of that dragon, well, that will distract it, and hopefully then you can destroy the boss without it inflicting too much damage. Well, the end of level boss room, I really have no idea if this is the end of World 2, given all those confusing end of World 2 messages that we've already seen already. So I really still don't know for sure if this is World 2 or World 3 or Part 1 or Part 2. And so, yes, again, we are still waiting to get to the end of level boss. The bosses are really large, they really are well drawn and well animated, and defeating those bosses certainly is not easy. They are harder than Turrican 2 bosses, and you will need the right approach. So 3 spears there really does help, and well, more snakes, endless more snakes and more enemies to kill there, just to wipe our last life virtually down to 0. Just to deplete our energy just when we are in sight virtually of the boss. And yet that is very annoying indeed when I wanted to complete the boss and show you how to do it. I also forgot to open the door to the crystal, which is unfortunate. After sitting here for over an hour, let's forward this game and finally try and get to the end of World 2. Here we go. The boss breathes fire, and it won't be long before I die. So thank you for viewing my play guide and review to the 1991 Amiga classic Gods, developed by the BITMAP brothers. Hope to see you again in another play guide review sometime soon. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you guys later.